name's Charles Urquhart. I'm a member of Yes, Kirkintilloch, Lenzie and the Villages, and I'm a poor substitute for Ruth Wishart, who can't make it tonight. But I'll try my best to keep up with her highly professional standards. We have with us tonight a very interesting panel. We have Rona McKay, SNP, MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden since May 2016. We've Dr. Carolynn Scrimgeour from the Scottish Greens, who grew up in Bishopbriggs and now lives in Lenzie. And we have Delia Henry from the Alba party, who was born in the East End of Glasgow and used to be a member of the SNP. The format tonight is going to be a 5-minute introduction from each person on the panel, and then we've got a question and answer session, and then at the very end we'll have a 5-minute roundup where you have closing remarks. So if everyone's ready, we'll start with Rona.
Okay. Rona. Thank you, Charlie. Thanks very much for chairing this event. I wasn't actually prepared for the 5-minute introduction, but I'll do my best. So yeah, I mean, but we live in interesting times, and I think probably the first thing to say is that obviously everybody on this call here agree with, we're all wanting the same thing. We all support the same thing. I guess I'm quite surprised that we're not having this with some unionists on it, as a normal hustings would be, I have to say. But I'm happy to discuss between the three of us our different views on how we get our independence, which is what we all want, and as soon as possible. So you said in your introduction, I was the MSP for Strathkelvin and Bearsden, and I'm the candidate at the minute, Charlie. So just to keep that straight. So yeah, so I mean, I was elected in 2016, and those 5 years have absolutely flown in, and it's been a huge learning curve and thoroughly enjoyable. There's been it's such interesting times to be involved in politics. And we have seen our movement gain in popularity so massively. Obviously, the last year and a bit have been extraordinary for everybody, and it actually goes out with politics. But I think most people agree that Scottish Government and our First Minister have handled the pandemic extremely efficiently, extremely well, and the communication has been second to none. And I think, that a lot of people now see what experienced leadership means when they watch Nicola Sturgeon, and you just have to look south of the border just to see what leadership shouldn't mean. And the Tories are definitely going from one crisis to another, and quite incredible, how little scrutiny the Prime Minister gets compared to the First Minister for anything that he does, and for all the almost daily allegations that are coming out about him. He manages just to slide through it, whereas the First Minister, of course, was grilled for 8 hours just for something that was out with her control to an extent. So double standards as usual with Westminster. But I think, we as I say, we live in interesting times, and I think we are closer to independence than ever before. Not just me. I think it's well known that we are. I think most people, even unionists in denial, will say it is only a matter of time. It's not if, it's when. And I think we're within touching distance. So I'm really delighted to be standing, and I'm obviously hoping to be re-elected, and I'm really excited about it, because I think in this term this is when we will get our independence, and we may have some differing views between parties and certain things, but the overriding thing is that we all want independence, and I think Scotland will be changed so much for the better. I know I'm preaching to the converted, but it will be, and happy to go along with any questions that come, and that's pretty much all I'll say at the minute. Charlie.
Thank you, Rona. Carolynn.
Thanks very much, Charlie. Thanks for inviting me along. It's a pleasure to be here and join you. I'm sorry it's not in person. So my name's Carolynn Scrimgeour. I'm one of the lead candidates for the West Scotland region for the Scottish Greens. I'm second on the list behind Ross Greer, who's been our MSP for the West Scotland as our first Scottish Greens MSP in the past parliamentary term. I'm also a doctor. I'm a consultant oncologist, so I treat patients with cancer. And I'm a mum to 2 wee boys. I live in Lenzie, and I grew up, as Charlie said, in Bishopbriggs. So I've been in East Dunbartonshire for most of my life. I got involved in politics in the independence referendum. It's a real pleasure to be back at this meeting because, yes, Kirky and Lenzie was my first experience of canvassing and leafleting and street stalls, and just that whole summer, autumn of 2014 brings back lots of happy memories. And it certainly, after that disappointing, extremely disappointing result, the painful memory, I've not been able to let politics go since. I've wanted to continue to work for that positive, inclusive, hopeful Scotland that we all envisaged in 2014. Certainly the Scottish Greens, we're part of a global movement of Greens that have as one of our core pillars radical democracy, meaning that we're bringing power, democratic power, as close to the people who are affected by that power as we possibly can. And independence is a crucial part of that. So it's easy for us as Greens to support independence. We campaigned for a Green Yes vote in 2014, and we had a Green Yes paper, a different vision for how an independent Scotland might be to the white paper that was proposed by the SNP. And we relaunched our Green Yes campaign on the day that the UK exited the EU, and we had a wonderful campaign of leafleting and canvassing planned, and then COVID hit. And unfortunately, that was all put on the back burner. Those leaflets are sitting there ready to go. So we're more than happy to dive back in as soon as we're able. But we are absolutely anxious to push for an independent Scotland, not just to win a referendum, but to show the people of Scotland the kind of independent nation that we want to see and that we want to build. We know that the fundamental issues that's facing Scotland, tackling the climate emergency, recovering from COVID, dealing with the poverty and inequality that lies in our society and underlies the health and educational gaps that we see, we know that those are best dealt with in Scotland by the people that it affects. And we know that it cannot be dealt with and will not be dealt with from Westminster. So we absolutely want to drive for independence, and the Scottish Greens, all Scottish Green MSPs that are elected on the 6th of May will campaign for support Scottish independence. Until we achieve independence, though, the Scottish Greens will continue to work in the way that we have as collaborative, constructive opposition in the Scottish Parliament. We know that the way that Holyrood was set up, it was set up for collaboration, for parties to work together, and we believe that's the best way to make good policy, to make good legislation, to make improvements that affect people's lives day to day. And the Scottish Greens have won concessions through budget deals and various other things that have led to, for example, pandemic relief payments for those that are worst affected by the coronavirus pandemic, for free school meals for those in primary 4 to 7, as well as P1 to 3, for free bus travel for those under the age of 22, for an increase by £100 million for public sector pay. These are just a handful of the achievements from a small group of Green MSPs. But we know we can and must do much more to tackle poverty, to address the climate emergency, and to secure our independence. And that's why we're asking you to vote like our future depends on it, and to vote Green on May the 6th.
Thank you, Carolynn. Delia.
Thanks, Charlie. I want to add my thanks with the other candidates for the invitation to come along tonight with Yes Kirkintilloch, Lenzie and the Villages. Excuse me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here, and I'll tell people a wee bit about myself and why I'm standing as a candidate for Alba. I have lived in East Dunbartonshire. You touched on the fact that I come from East End of Glasgow originally, Charlie, but I've lived in East Dunbartonshire for over 30 years, and I brought my sons up here, and 2 of my grandchildren live over in Bearsden now. So East Dunbartonshire is kind of in our blood. My personal background and professionally, I've been director of 3 National Director of 3 major charities. I set up Diabetes UK in Scotland. I was the Director of RNID, Royal National Insurance for the Deaf, and the Director of Age Scotland as a charity. So health and social care is what I have done for over 25 years. So and working alongside the Scottish Parliament has been since its inception, has been a big part of my professional life. So understand the importance of the Scottish Parliament. And during that time have always supported independence, because I really, really know the difference, the sea change we could make if we were independent and we made our own decisions on things like the economy and health, and Carolynn touched on it, poverty. Sadly, in Scotland, we have such a dramatic gap in our population. I remember doing an event 20 years ago in Drumchapel, and the life expectancy of a man in Drumchapel was 10 years less than a man in Bearsden. That's now 12 and a half years. We need to do something about that. We really need to do something about that. And that's during the course of our Parliament. We need to get away from Westminster, because we can't change that in one of the potentially richest countries in the world with our natural resources, and would agree 100% with what Caroline's saying about the environment. So that is something that we need to take into the power of the Scottish Parliament and drive forward. I'm standing as a candidate for the Alba party because I believe that another independence party, a new and different approach to independence is critical, and would add to Rona's point that the more independence supporting MSPs in the Scottish Parliament that we have, we do not have to ask permission from Westminster. We can say that the Scottish people have said, we want independence. So collaboratively working together, and as Carolynn had said, is the way to go. And I believe the Alba party can bring that real value to the table, and across the piece, working together to achieve an independent Scotland in Europe and really work in our economy to change those issues that we have. Thank you.
I'm sorry if I was distracted there. I was looking for the first 3 questions, which is, and these screens is all over the place. So I'm trying to find them. What I'll do, if you don't mind, is we'll come back to the 3 questions. But I have a question here, and we'll just do it in order. Rona, this one for you first is, over the past few years, the Scottish Greens have gained approval from Scottish Government to implement plans in their manifesto in return for coalition support. What is top of their bargaining list this time around? I should probably ask you, Carolynn, instead of it. I should read the whole question first, shouldn't I? Right, sorry, Carolynn, I'll let you answer that one.
No, not at all. I think, as I mentioned in my opening statement, we work and will continue to work constructively with the Scottish Government, because I believe that's how the Scottish Parliament was set up. The intention was that we don't have a majority government, that we have a minority or a coalition of parties that better represents more of the population's views. And as I said, I think that that's the best way for us to get improvements in legislations, rather than a majority government whipping through legislation that it wants. I think that whether or not we talk of coalitions or confidence in supply, or how technically that works, will clearly depend on the makeup of how the Scottish Parliament looks afterwards. Clearly, the Scottish Greens are committed to an independent Scotland in Europe. We're also committed to tackling the climate emergency. I don't think that I would hand on heart say one of those is more of a priority than the other, because I believe that both are essential for each other to happen. I don't believe that Scotland can adequately tackle the climate emergency without the powers that independence would bring. But as I've mentioned, the Scottish Greens are absolutely committed to fully using the powers that the devolved Scottish Government already has, and will continue to drive for the improvements that we can win within the devolved administration, or the devolved Parliament, until such times as we're in a position to win Scotland's independence. So I would say that I would give those two things equal priority. Clearly, recovery from the pandemic is going to be crucial too. And as a doctor, that's something that is obviously close to my heart, because the health service is key to that. I'm sure that everyone already knows that government is able to do multiple things and should be able to do multiple things at the one time. So I guess I've just fudged that answer and said that I've got loads of priorities and they're all equally top.
Good stuff. Delia, this is one for you. Alba have stated in their manifesto their intent to seek membership of the EFTA rather than going straight for EU membership. What are the advantages and disadvantages of this approach? And I may get comments from the others on that.
Okay. The advantages of joining EFTA, even as an initial step, not necessarily definitively in the longer term, would be that if we are independent, we would immediately be able to go into Europe and go into an economic partnership much more quickly than getting back into the EU. EU would be the ultimate objective, but because we were, and we'll use the terminology that we'll all use, dragged out of Europe against our will, which is the sea change around the independence question, we would need to do this quickly. Currently, COVID and Brexit together is going to have a massive impact on our economy. And to be in a European partnership would give us the opportunities to kickstart our economy much more quickly, as opposed to waiting what would be several years at least to get back into the EU. It may be the ultimate aim, but that is the reason for that. And there have been a couple of initial discussions around this. So it would be pushing at an open door potentially. So if we could argue that case, it could be beneficial to Scotland and our economy in an independent country.
Great, thank you. Rona, you want to comment on that? You're muted, sorry, Rona.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I mean, I disagree with the approach that Alba's taking in this. I think we should focus all our energy once we're independent to getting into the EU. For many reasons, and I think probably the overriding one was that 62% of the people in Scotland voted to remain in the EU, and I don't think we should accept anything less. I mean, I take Delia's point about trying to get back into Europe as quickly as possible. I'm just not sure, and I don't know the mechanics of how simple that would be once we got into EFTA to get back out of it again. And it may take several years, and it may be very complicated. We may have commitments there that we can't get out of. So I would not support going into EFTA. We know that the EU countries have said they would welcome us. So I think we should start just as soon as we can to make approaches to get back into the EU as an independent country. And I wouldn't support going into EFTA first. You're muted, Charlie.
Sorry, Carolynn.
Thanks. Yeah, so I guess broadly I agree with what's already been said insofar as our aim is for Scotland to be an independent country within the EU. I can see and understand the benefits of being in the European Economic Area again for business, and I think that is what underpins the proposal for EFTA. But like Rona, I'm not sure if there are potential complications as to whether that would impact on our ability to join the EU, which should absolutely be our long-term aim, in my view, for all sorts of benefits, not just economic, but obviously freedom of movement for all EU citizens, regaining our EU citizenship. And for that reason, I would certainly want to maintain the long-term aim of EU membership, and would need to know more about the impact of EFTA membership on that.
Here we go. Sorry about that. I'll get the hang of this technology probably within the. I've found the questions that I've looked back to, and question one is An SNP candidate was recently quoted as stating that he did not think a referendum should be held until support is around 70%. Is this a widely held view within the independent supporting parties? I'll start with Rona there.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Yeah, well, I don't support that view at all, and I don't believe it's widely held within the SNP. If you, obviously everybody remembers that in 2014 we started with 28% support for a referendum. We got that to 45%, and so much has happened since then that the polls are showing, say 50-50, sometimes more. And I think that's a fantastic standing start. And I don't see how, frankly, I don't see how we could lose if we start from that base. So I would be happy. Obviously, the higher you can get, the better, because we all want to be confident that we will win. And the more support you have before we have the referendum is obviously better. But yeah, no, I mean 70%. I wouldn't think we have to go to that. I think enough has happened, and people are now beginning to waken up to the fact that this is our chance. And I think with around 50% or above, we should be fine.
Delia, would you like to answer that one?
Yeah, I agree with Rona. 70% seems a long time to wait, potentially. We got from a very low base in mid-20s to 45% in 2 years. I would like to think, I mean, the figures have slipped back a wee bit, but Brexit will be the big difference there. It would be reasonable to assume that people who voted maybe no in 2014, with the outcome of Brexit, would certainly be much more amenable to voting yes next time around. So 70% seems unnecessarily high, and that would be lots of polling. So no, I would be much keener to go forward sooner rather than later, starting the whole process almost as soon as we can after the May elections to kickstart the whole independence move again and getting things back up a gear. So no, it would be the answer to that.
Okay, Carolynn.
Thanks. Yeah, agree. No, 70% seems unnecessarily high, and not something that I recognise from discussion with people within our party as being a figure that we would aspire to. Certainly, as I'm sure as everyone else would agree, our aspiration isn't to hold an independence referendum, but to win it. And so we want to make sure that we are comfortable that we're going to win it. We're starting from a much better starting point than we were, clearly, as Rona's already said. But we do want to be able to campaign. We want to be able to get out and talk to those people who are currently leaning towards no or who are undecided and convince them, hopefully, that backing yes is the way forward. We want to be able to engage in that exciting campaign that we had in 2014 and get that 50% maybe that we're currently at higher. But I don't have an arbitrary percentage that we'd be aiming for. I'd be delighted to get campaigning whenever we're allowed.
Thank you. Question 2, and there's a sort of follow-up that's come in since. Question 2 was, after the election, what will the pro-Indy parties be doing to promote independence and increase public support? For example, what materials have or will be produced? I know, Carolynn, you said you've got a pile already waiting there, and someone else has added on to that. What will panellists do to engage with the public on independence if elected? I'll start with Delia this time.
Okay, the Alba manifesto, we are proposing almost immediately setting up an independence commission and to really kickstart the discussion. You know, when you look at what's been going on in the Scottish Government, there has been no real structures around how we will achieve, other than a Section 30, an independence and moving that forward. So we would be looking to an independence commission, which would start the discussions between independence supporting elected officials in Scottish Parliament and Westminster, a kind of meeting of minds. At the moment, that's not really happening. And that would give them the chance to go to their constituents and start this debate right away. So it's an actual tangible process, and it would be a two-way dialogue. And that's what we would propose to do quite quickly. And at all times engaging with the yes supporting groups across Scotland to keep this dialogue going and finding out what the issues are and kick-starting the whole process again. It's starting to feel a wee bit like 2014, this election. People are quite excited. I was hearing people before saying, oh, this feels dull, and a couple of people actually thought about what am I going to do, who am I going to vote for? But I'm hearing people being enthused. We need to capture that and keep it going moving forward. And this commission, Independence Commission, is the key for us to see how we would do that.
Rona.
I need to get quicker on the unmute button. Yeah, I mean, obviously, we need to immediately start talking to people about the benefits and putting out a positive message about independence. You know, as far as materials, etc., go, we obviously, and the First Minister has said this, we will be producing another manifesto as we did in 2014, but of course it'll be very different. It'll be updated to deal with today's scenario in all sorts of ways. So that will be, the manual for people to look at when we get there. But we have a way to get there. We have to persuade people, and as Carolynn said, we're not just having the referendum for the sake, we're having a referendum to win it. And so, we need to persuade people to vote for us, and I believe we can do that very positively. And I think, with the help of the Yes movement, with Business for Scotland, and we're seeing much more of civic society becoming aware and actually lending their voice to the independence cause. So we need to engage with them. On a personal level, if I'm elected, I would obviously spread the message as much as I could in social media. Also, I quite often have street surgeries, which I enjoy, and that's when in normal times you can go up and knock someone's door and have a chat. So we could use that for putting the message over. But I mean, I think at the end of the day, we've got to push the message that if the democratic will of the people of Scotland, if they've voted for pro-independence parties in this election, then we've got to make it as hard as possible for Boris Johnson to say no. I disagree with Delia a wee bit when she said nothing was been happening in the Scottish Government. That's not really the case. And we've put through a referendums bill, for example. There's been an awful lot of legal avenues being looked at in the background. Obviously, they're aware that Boris Johnson's very likely to say no to a Section 30. So they've not been sitting about wondering what to do. They've been making moves to see how else we can achieve that. So I think positivity and persuasion are the things I would say.
Carolynn.
Yeah, I'll be dusting off my leaflets to get them out. We would absolutely want to be relaunching Green Yes, so the green vision for what an independent Scotland could be like. Within the EU, a greener, fairer Scotland, essentially, is what we're aiming for. We would absolutely want to be out engaging with voters, no voters, yes voters, those in between. Yes groups, I'd be more than happy to come and speak to yes groups like yourselves or any other, and obviously COVID has taught us that technology means that that's more doable maybe than it has been in the past. I think having those kind of conversations, those town hall discussions that we had so many of in 2014, that I think were really crucial to building that momentum is important. And talking about the kind of fundamental issues or the vision for what we want Scotland to be like when it's independent, and getting that excitement again for a different future, a different path is key. And I think that is key to how we convince more people to back yes, so that we have an even bigger mandate than perhaps current polling would suggest. In terms of the political process, clearly electing a pro-independence majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament is crucial, and all the polling is suggesting that that's going to be the case. And then, as I've said, all Green MSPs that are elected to the Scottish Parliament will support independence, will campaign for it, have supported the referendum bill and previous legislation towards Scottish independence. And if Westminster Government continue to refuse that, given repeated mandates for independence, then we believe that that would be open to legal challenge, and would want to pursue that. But absolutely, in the background, we need to be making that positive case so that when we are in a position to hold an independence referendum, we have the votes to win it.
Thank you. The third question that we had that missed out was in the SNP manifesto. Nicola Sturgeon has stated that if they were elected, there will be an independence referendum in the first half of the parliamentary term if the COVID crisis has passed, in quotation. What are the criteria for determining if the crisis has passed? And I'll go back to you, as Carolyn, as a professional, for that question.
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure what the criteria that Nicola Sturgeon is referring to. I think that at the minute, people still feel the potential danger of COVID, is my impression. People are still, obviously, we're only just starting to get back to some normality. I see more people on the train when I'm going to work. People are coming into hospitals a bit more, our waiting rooms are looking a wee bit busier. But people are still anxious about coming close to people, about the potential for catching COVID. The success of the vaccine programme has meant that people are more comfortable to be a bit more free, and I definitely see that. But I think this autumn, winter is going to be the big challenge in terms of seeing the success of that vaccine programme, whether it holds up, if new variants come into the country, if COVID variants happen within the UK, if the vaccine continues to confer that same protection. And obviously the autumn winter period is when COVID cases tend to surge because people are more indoors. If we are gathering, then that's when COVID is able to be transmitted. That's much less likely to be the case in the summer. So I think that I don't have hard and fast criteria for what us being out the other side will look like. But I think that people will feel safer if we have gotten through next autumn, winter, can see that case numbers and hopefully deaths aren't surging again because of the success of the vaccine programme and whether boosters are required, etc. And that will mean that us as political candidates, people who are on the doors, will feel more able to have the kind of conversations that we need to be having to hold an independence referendum. We need to be campaigning, we need to be engaging. We can't currently do that. We can't convince some folk who are currently leaning towards voting no without going out and talking to them and hearing about what their concerns are. And I think most of us know that that's best done where a person's comfortable door knocking or having those kind of conversations face to face. And we cannot currently do that. And I don't personally think that we would be likely to be able to do that until we've seen what this autumn winter's like. I hope, desperately hope, that we don't see another surge in cases. Of course I do. But I think I would certainly imagine that we would all be more comfortable to be able to campaign once we're through that and out the other side. And hopefully that means that COVID is a thing of the past, at least in terms of the threat that we feel.
Thank you, Carolyn. I take it both Rona and Delia agree with that. Or is there anything you would like to add to that?
Can I just add something? I agree with Carolyn. People have to be comfortable with this, but it doesn't preclude politicians working on how we could get there in the meantime. And I mean that about processes, etc. So that would be the only caveat I would give, because I agree with Carolyn. People need to be comfortable about campaigning and talking to others. I mean, Rona and I talked earlier about not champing doors. I wouldn't do that. Technically, we're allowed to just now, but it would infringe on people and frighten them, and that's not a good thing to do. But certainly it doesn't preclude our politicians working in the meantime to do that. And a quantification of that, once we know the health implications, would be really useful for people.
Rona?
Yeah, I'll be really brief. I mean, I agree with Carolyn's comments, really. And I mean, apart from the sort of moral and sort of responsible obligations upon us to keep people safe, I mean, that's a given. But it would be madness to start campaigning for a referendum while there are restrictions still in place, because we need to have visibility, we need to engage, we need to get it back to, or even better than the 2014 engagement, which was fantastic. And we can't do that if there's still restrictions and people are still wary and nervous. So I would love to have a referendum as soon as possible, or start organising one. I genuinely would, but I think we have to be realistic and say we need to do it when it's safe to do it. And that's the way that we'll get success, I think.
Yeah, I'm still fighting technology here. I've lost my tab at the side for questions, but we're getting there. This one's for you, Rona. We're starting off with you. Immediately after the EU referendum, there was a surge in support for independence, but the SNP chose to campaign to keep the UK as a whole in the EU, or to seek a special deal, keeping Scotland in the single market. While within the UK, was it a mistake not to focus on independence at that time?
No, I don't think so. I think it was, such a massive thing for us to be getting taken out of the EU, and I mean Scotland and the rest of the UK. I think it would have been a mistake to focus entirely on independence. I think we had to say we do not accept this, and make the case that the people in Scotland didn't vote to leave. And I think it would have been counterproductive if we had been focusing on independence at a time when we keep us in the single market. We need those markets, and it would have been far too. I don't really know what the word is, but it would not have been in our best interest to have been a bit parochial about it and say we're just going to fight for independence now. We have to say this is affecting the whole of the UK, and I think it was the mature and responsible thing to do to make our cases strongly, and we did. But as ever, we don't get what we vote for because we're the smaller nations. So, but I don't think it was and I think the Scottish Government as a whole gained some respect for doing that, and I think it was important that they did it, because as a major, we want to be back as an internationalist party in Europe, and I think it would have been wrong for us just to immediately jump in and try and advance our cause at that particular time.
Comment on that?
Sorry, were you talking to me there, Charlie?
Yes.
I've lost your sound.
Delia, have you a comment on that?
I think not progressing it at the time upset a lot of people, certainly people in the Yes movement. So I think it's something that we need to kickstart again, and that's what Alba is looking to do. I do think we've lost ground, and it's ground that we need to gain quite quickly again. So I would disagree with Rona in that position, but we are where we are, so we need to move forward now. But it wouldn't have been my preferred option, but that was the decision taken at the time, and I think we've lost ground over it.
Carolynn?
I think as someone who's not an SNP supporter, from the outside, as someone who absolutely backs Yes, it made sense to me not to push for independence at that time. It made sense to be seen to be doing everything within our power, not to just be kind of perceived as driving every grievance and seeking independence at every opportunity. From the outside, I kind of felt like that might persuade more of those soft yes or soft no voters to support independence when the time comes, because it's not just we're pushing for every independence at every opportunity relentlessly, regardless of what the polls are telling us or what support is. But we are willing to work constructively within the mandate that the whole UK had set. And as much as I didn't support it, I don't want membership of the single market, I want membership of the EU. I think it felt like playing a long game, and I think I understood the rationale. And for a significant chunk of the country, I would imagine pushing for an independence referendum in 2016 would have felt pretty soon. We're now, I think, in a healthier position in terms of what the polls are telling us. And I think that that's been an incremental build. That I think that was, from my perspective, one part of that build was seeming to be constructive and doing as much as we could within the decision that the UK had made. That's my recollection of how I felt anyway.
Thank you. This is one for Rona and Carolynn, really. Alba have committed to a written constitution enshrining the sovereignty of the people of Scotland. What is the position of the other parties in terms of a written constitution, And if you support one, what would you have in it? Rona.
Yeah, I absolutely support a written constitution. I think it's imperative that we have one. I think every civilized country should have one, and obviously the content would be based around human rights and and values. And I think it's something that would be done pretty quickly after independence. But in fact, it's probably been sort of partially drawn up now. So absolutely support that. Yep.
Carolynn.
Yeah, I agree that a written constitution's crucial. The fact that we don't have one within the UK is a big part of how everything goes so terribly wrong. But enshrining our human rights in that written constitution and that underpinning the democratic process is key. So yeah, it's certainly part of our vision for an independent Green Scotland. Yeah.
Great stuff. This is another one for you, Carolynn. If they support independence, why are the Greens standing in constituencies as well as on the list? As this could split the SNP vote and cost places, I take it.
We're standing in constituencies because we're a separate political party to the SNP with a different vision. We stand for independent Scotland and Europe, tackling the climate emergency as a matter of urgency, and a different vision that's laid out in our manifesto for example, prioritising a just transition away from oil and gas, prioritising the kind of crucial change in our transport infrastructure that we believe is needed to reduce our transport emissions, which is the biggest contributor to greenhouse gases in Scotland. So we've got a completely different set of priorities. Some of them absolutely overlap. And where that is the case, we will work constructively with the SNP. But we're a political party and we are there to win political representation, to represent the people that are members of our party and constituents that vote for us. And with that in mind, we're going to stand wherever we can. Unfortunately, the way that the electoral system works, we cannot stand everywhere. I kind of wish that we could, and that would stop these questions happening, because that's what we want to be able to do, is to stand in every election everywhere, give everyone the opportunity to vote Green. And I would love to be able to vote Green everywhere at every election. But first past the post elections do not lend themselves to Greens winning, unfortunately. We need to continue to contest those elections where we can, though, because we are a political party and that's what we want to do, is to win elected representation. So that's why. However, everywhere in Scotland, people can vote Green. And so whether we're standing in constituencies or not, we are on the regional list, and absolutely we want to give everyone the opportunity, and that's why we're doing that.
Thank you for that. I think this one's for Delia, and then I'll go to the others. Old age pensions pre and post 1954, there was a significant difference. WASPy women were shortchanged on wages, salaries, and then robbed by Westminster. Would you like to comment on that?
Certainly would. I mean, your state pension it's not a privilege, and governments make political decisions what levels of state pension there will be. Alba Party are saying, and I completely agree with this, that we will champion older people and pensioners. It's often not seen as the kind of thing to do, because we talk rightly a lot about education and health, etc. But older people and pensioners really need a quality of life, and I feel very strongly about that. WASPy women in particular have had a dreadful deal. We would advocate that the pension age should be eventually, it should be brought into line, but WASPy women have had a terrible deal, and they have been treated really badly with the Westminster government. I mean, basically the changes, it was a Lib Dem and a Tory coalition that brought in the changes in 2011, which made the difference to women's pensions in particular, and they didn't tell them, and there were no benefits attached. So we would certainly campaign really strongly with WASPy women to get them treated fairly, because they've been treated appallingly.
Rona?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. The WASPy women situation is one of the worst scandals and one of the worst things that's happened to women who were born in their 50s. And quite frankly, it was theft by the Westminster government. Obviously, UK pensions are reserved. And, you know, the wider issue of that is we've got the worst pensions in the whole of Europe. And that's something that obviously in an independent Scotland, we would address, you know, as a priority. But, you know, going back to the WASPy women, it's just utterly shocking, you know, what's happened. It's you know, it's their money, and it is theft. As Delia says, it's not a benefit, it's a right, it's your money. It's, you know, it's like putting your money in the bank and suddenly some of it you're not allowed to take it out or it disappears. So I wish we had enough money in our armory at the minute to compensate these women. I really do. But I think if, you know, in an independent Scotland, it would be priority because our party are very, very aware of the injustice that was done to these women.
Carolynn?
Yeah, you're going to get widespread agreement on this one. As Rona mentioned, obviously there's the wider issue of how poor our pension scheme is for everyone, but the specific injustice done to WASPy women is indefensible, and the shifting of the goalposts has just been so damaging. And as I say, it's unacceptable, should have been addressed already, and we would absolutely support addressing it. As has been mentioned, it's a reserved issue, and if the Scottish Government could afford to address it, I imagine that they would, but completely committed to that because it's an unacceptable injustice that's been done to those women.
This one, we'll start with Rona for this one. So far, the Westminster government had rejected another referendum, and it seems they will not change that position. Assuming either an SNP or a cross-party independence majority after the 6th of May, how will each of you push to achieve independence in the absence of a Westminster permission? Start with you, Rona.
Gosh, I'll remember one of these days. You know, how we could progress with independence in the, you know, in the event that we don't get the Section 30. And that's looking at the legal routes that we can take and the ways that we can do this. As far as you still got me? My internet seemed to cut out there. Can you still hear me?
Yes, you're
right. Okay, I got a message to say it cut out. Yeah. So, I mean, I think all we can do as elected members, or not even elected activists and independent supporters, are just to keep spreading the message and make it clear that, you know, this is going to be better for Scotland, and demonstrate how and explain why. And I think that's certainly what I'll be doing. And you know, the legal mechanisms will be going on at a different level, but it will be going on. I mean, there is no going back. This will happen.
Carolynn?
Yeah. So securing a pro-independence majority of MSPs in the Scottish Parliament is the first thing. Obviously, everyone knows we've had that for the past 5 years, so I can appreciate the question as, well, what do you do differently next time? And I think the difference is the Scottish Government, the Scottish people have and will say that we have a democratic mandate that will lead to legal challenge if a Section 30 order is not given. And if that is not accepted within the UK, then that would be an international court legal challenge. I'm not going to pretend to be the constitutional expert that can talk you through the exact process, but there are absolutely legal frameworks for us to drive that, and that's essential. Because, as has already been said, we cannot rely on Boris Johnson being willing to give us a Section 30 order or to permit an independence referendum to happen. And so we're not going to be sitting back. We're going to be pushing through the legal frameworks to have an internationally recognised democratic referendum that will secure our independence.
Delia?
Yeah, I mean, I've touched on the model that we've talked about the Scottish Government that we would have. immediately a commission set up. That would be our driver to do that, to keep the dialogue going. But it has to be a legal framework, but it would be a Section 30 and look at other avenues. We can't just wait for a Section 30, which seems to have been the where we are up until now. I also think we need to change the dialogue. I think how we can't keep asking, we need to be much more proactive around this. And that's at the moment, it's a power struggle. But if we have this supermajority in the Scottish Parliament of independents supporting MSPs, that's a massive first step to this. And we need to do this come the 6th of May.
Thank you. Here's one for Rona, and it was bound to come, Rona. Given that I'm going to use my constituency vote for Rona, why should I and hundreds of thousands of Scots in the Central Belt waste a list vote for the SNP, given that the result, if it happens, will give us more unionist MSPs?
Okay, I mean, obviously there are so many opinions in this, you know, it's unbelievable. I mean, I just feel, you know, I think the questioner says that, you know, we can get unionist votes if we do that. Well, you know, I might contend that by voting, giving your second vote to another party, a pro-independence party, might also let unionists slip in and split the vote. I mean, I'm not a psephologist. I don't have all the technical answers of it. All I can do is answer with in honesty, that I just don't think we're so close to independence at this point. I do not think we should take any risks or gamble with any votes. The polls just now are all over the place. They change from day to day. Even within a day, they'll change. And, you know, in 2011, we had a majority because we got constituency and list seats. In 2016, we got very few list seats and we lost our majority. And, you know, I think we have to have a very credible, as strong a credible majority as possible. You know, and with all due respect to Alba, a newly formed party, I don't think does have that credibility. And at a very basic level, I just keep thinking, you know, if you support a party, if you're giving SNP your first vote, you're supporting a party who is the vehicle for getting us their independence. Why would you vote for another party with your second vote? It just doesn't make sense to me. And I think this is not the time to take any chances at all, because we've never been closer to independence. And that's, you know, I appreciate other people have different views, and I'm not saying I'm right. That's just the way I feel about it.
Thank you. Carolynn?
Oh, why shouldn't you vote SNP on the list? Because you should vote Green. I would say
that was coming.
I think I don't want to speak as if I'm encouraging you to game the system. I want to convince you to vote Green because it's a positive thing that you want to do. I want you to believe in the kind of independent Scotland that we are pushing for, that we want to see that just transition, that an independent greener Scotland, that we're driving and tackling the climate emergency, that we want to tackle poverty, all the things that I hope were encapsulated in that 2014 independence referendum, but that we want to see in Scotland now and in an independent Scotland. So I want you to vote Green because you believe that we are the party that you want to be representing you in the Scottish Parliament. And it's not about, I don't think it's about tactical voting or how many list votes different parties are going to get. Vote for who you believe in. And if you can find someone who represents you or a party that represents you, then vote for them. And I hope that now or through reading, I can convince you that voting Green is the way to go.
And Delia, I suppose you agree with that, do you?
I don't agree that you have to vote for the same party in your constituency and the list, obviously, because Alba are advocating vote SNP in the constituency, Alba on the list. I agree with Carolynn that people need to think about what they're voting for. I would also argue that in the 2016 election, in the west of Scotland, the region that we're talking about just now, almost 136,000 votes went to SNP and it got no SNP MSPs at all. There were 6 unionists in that. None of the candidates here want that. So in other countries, and I think it was Carolynn touched on this before, in other countries in Europe, the De Hooy system is what they have. We've got this kind of mix of a system, probably the worst, that was designed by Westminster so that we didn't have a majority in the Scottish Parliament. 2011 SNP managed to get 1 additional seat. I remember counting it in my head as I was driving home. That was a fluke. We need to make sure we maximise the independence vote after this election. If we want to get, for example, we've discussed a lot tonight about Europe. Europe cannot and would not dream of deciding to tell us what party is in power. It has to be the people voting for an issue, in this instance, independence. So I would argue those 136,000 votes should go to best advantage in the west of Scotland to get us more independence supporting MSPs so that we can really have the supermajority that's going to get us on the next step to independence.
Just another question for you, Delia. Alba are a brand new party with no track record. Why should I vote for you, and what will you bring to the independence debate? Well, we already know some of that. And as to the Scottish Parliament, will you, for instance, ever bring down an SNP government?
Would we bring down an SNP government? The SNP government need to do something pretty dire to be brought down, I would suggest. We're a new party, but if you look at the polls yesterday, we get 6% of the polls in the polls. That means we're getting seats. It could mean on the basis at the last in 2016, one of the Green candidates got just under 6% and got a seat. So we're on track to get 7 or 8 seats on the polls. So that's not, we're new, but we're not inexperienced. We've got a lot of experienced politicians. We've got 2 MPs at Westminster, that's double the Labour Party. We've got 20 councillors, so that's pretty experienced, and a lot of them are standing as candidates for MSPs. We've got a breadth of experience in the candidates that are standing in the Scottish Parliament. Hopefully you would think I was one of them. And we are bringing that to the table. So we've got lots of experience, lots of expertise, and lots of politicians. So I don't think because we're new, we're not good. I think we're very good, and that's why I'm part of it. So look at the polls, think about what we're doing, and look at our manifesto, because it's not the back of a fag packet. There's been a lot of thought put into this and a lot of work.
This one's for Rona, and it's from a teacher. I have concerns with the curriculum on sex education and relationships. The concerns are to the age and stage appropriateness for our children. I also am concerned with safeguarding issues which may come from this curriculum. Have evaluations been done with parents and pupils to measure outcomes? What was the main source used for this part of the curriculum? My background, as I mentioned earlier, is a teacher of around 40 years, 16 as head of a primary school. Rona.
Thanks, Charlie. Yeah, I mean, well, I don't have concerns about the curriculum and sex education and relationships, to be perfectly honest. I think we need to educate our children as soon as possible, as soon as is age appropriate. I think we don't want to go back to the dark old days of, learning about the birds and bees when you get into adolescence and all that. I think that every modern civilized country now is of the view that we should start to responsibly teach our children sex education. It just makes for a much healthier society. I'm seeing the question in the chat here, and I'm not sure what the questioner means by concerned with safeguarding issues. I don't know what that means. Evaluations being done with parents and pupils to measure outcomes. Well, I mean, curriculum subjects are always evaluated in the sense that they're discussed with teachers, with the education authorities, with teaching unions. It's not just a government that says, we'll do this, we'll do that. There is a lot of thought and research goes into it, academic research goes into it. So I appreciate that the questioner has a different view, and they're absolutely entitled to that, but I have no concerns about it, and I'm very glad we're pursuing a responsible line of teaching our children sex education.
Carolynn, would you like to comment on that?
Sure. So as I mentioned, I'm a mum to 2 wee boys. One of them is primary school age, and I've seen him go through the age appropriate, I think, relationship and sex education. He's a primary school child, so I'm sure there are other people who would be concerned, or perhaps that's what the questioner is alluding to. I have no concerns. I think that we have the types of discussions that are happening in school anyway. It's important for him to know at his age the types of changes that are going to be happening to his body, the feelings that he's going to have, the way that he should be respectful of other people's wishes, the fact that now relationship education includes consent is because of Ross Greer lobbying for that, and that's a really important lesson for us to be teaching our boys and young men, as well as all young people, all the way through from an early age. I think that schools are not the whole answer to all of society's problems, absolutely not, but I think education is key to healthy relationships and sexual relationships too. And I think that from my perspective, the curriculum as a parent seems appropriate to me.
Delia?
I think age-appropriate education is absolutely critical. Rona talked about the evidence base in a curriculum, and I think that's really important in research. But I also think parents have to be involved in the dialogue. Carolynn rightly talked about engaging with the school, and I think that's important. And I think parents should be part of the discussion. That wasn't touched on, and I'm sure it would happen appropriately, but I do think it's important, particularly in a situation like sex education, which absolutely is important that children should understand and know what's appropriate as they grow and their body changes. However, I do think families have to be brought in. Carolynn's right, it's not just all about schools, it's got to be in the wider context. So we can't just default to schools, and we must have a wider discussion and dialogue so that everyone is comfortable about an education programme, including sex education.
Thank you for that. This one from obviously someone worried about numbers. Have demographics played a big part in the rise of independence, given that 400,000 of Scots, mainly elderly, have died since September 2014, and given that the no majority was 400,000. Would you like to comment on that, Carolynn?
Gosh, that's a bit of a sad
I know.
A statistic.
I'm just
a bit stark. I'm sure that, those young people that were, 8, 9, 10 at the time of the independence referendum were voting for the first time in the Holyrood election, and they were kind of learning, I think, about the democratic process right in the middle of that 2014 referendum. And I hope the majority of them support independence. In fact, that's what the polls suggest. So I'm sure demographics are part of it. We have some young people who are coming to vote for the first time, and they support independence. I think as much as 3/4 of them support independence. So the proportion of young people who support independence is huge. I don't want to think too much about the older people dropping off the other end. So I'm going to take it as a positive and say that we've convinced younger people that independence is the future of Scotland. And I hope that that will be something with time that increases and will help us to make that positive case that convinces a significant majority to back independence when the time comes.
Thank you. Delia?
I think it's quite stark, the question as well, the 400,000 analogy. I think it's important to bring everybody with us. In an independent country, we're going to have older people. We talked earlier about pensions and things. That was one of the big issues that was brought up in 2014. People were worried about not having an income. And so it's incumbent on independent supporters in the Yes Group, which was, I felt, very, very positive in 2014, to keep that dialogue going and encourage older people that independence is for them. I also would comment that in the Brexit referendum, it was primarily older people who wanted to remain in Europe. So that's a significant argument that older people could be brought with us. So it's positive, it's constructive, and I do think we will bring people with us to get independence. But it's not a referendum and that's the end of it. We've seen what's happened with Brexit and all the difficulties that's caused in the north of England. We need to keep people on board, we need to keep the dialogue going. And it's not just about one day when we vote, it's an ongoing process that we need to keep going once we're independent. And if older people are worried about it, we need to bring them with us.
Rona?
Yep, I absolutely agree. I think we do need to bring older people with us, and I don't have the figures in front of me or in my head, but I mean, I think I'm right in saying that more older people now do support independence, and always bearing in mind that in 2014 there was terrible scaremongering from, you know, Project Fear going on to old people, telling them they wouldn't get a pension in independent Scotland and everything. And I think people have woken, you know, become alive to that now, and feel that they were lied to. So I think there's evidence that older people are moving towards this. Demographics do play a big part, and I think young people generally do support an independent Scotland. I know from going into schools over the past 5 years, talking to modern studies classes, you know, that the questions I get are very much geared towards when are we going to be independent, and they're very, very receptive. I don't go in, I can't go into schools and be political, obviously I don't, but if they're doing a modern studies you know, subject on the Parliament or in politics, I get the questions and I answer them honestly. And I would honestly, every time I've been in a school, I come out thinking young people are with us. And I also think just this gives lie to the, you know, once in a generation thing, because, you know, as Carolynn said, you know, if you think about in 2014, you know, 9 and 10-year-olds, that's what age the young people now who'll be voting next Thursday, you know, were. So really, that gives a new generation a chance to have a say in their own country's future. So yeah, I mean, I think I'm hopeful, and it should be. I mean, you know, that I won't see the benefits of independence when we get it, but my grandchildren will. So and it should be for young people, I think.
Okay, thank you. A question here. I'll start with you, Rona, in this one. Is it highly satisfactory that the SNP NEC hasn't discussed independence for over 3 years? As a stakeholder in Believe in Scotland, our chairman, Gordon McIntyre Kemp, advises approaches to the SNP hit a complete brick wall. So how does that fare in relation to engagement?
Okay, I can't comment on whether I'm not on the NEC, so I mean, you know, the questioner's telling me they haven't discussed it. I would find that very hard to believe, but you know, I can't comment because I'm not on the NEC and I don't actually know whether they've been doing it. But the NEC is the executive committee of the party who will lead us to independence and have promoted independence for decades. So I mean, you know, to suggest that they're not interested in independence or don't discuss it, I find, you know, a wee bit incredible. You know, Gordon McIntyre Kemp advises SNP a brick wall. So I can't comment on that because I don't know, you know, what the circumstances around that are. But I would think that anybody that's a member of our party is focused on independence.
Would anyone, Delia or Carolynn, like to comment on that? No. Okay. Well, we're coming near the end of that. Probably we're all getting tired now. The technology is still working. So I'm going to ask a question to all three candidates first. Does your party have a group working on independent strategy? And what is your vision of an independent Scotland? And I'll start with Delia there.
Yes, we do. We are into our 5th week and we've had 2 policy conferences. And the first one was around 2 things. our independence strategy and our women inequalities policy. These were our first two discussion points with candidates. And we will be having a conference in the summer to further that. It's absolutely key to what we do. This is why the Alba Party is in existence. And we have economists and a group of academics that we're engaging with on this very thing. And we've started it now. It would be great to collaborate with other parties when we have MSPs in the Scottish Parliament, but absolutely, because it's the key to what we're doing and it's why Alba exists. So it's our main driver.
Carolynn?
As I've said a few times, we were in the process of relaunching Green Yes. Well, we did relaunch Green Yes just at the time that we left the EU, and then the COVID pandemic hit. So it's certainly all of the steps that we took to relaunch Green Yes remain in place. They will need updated, and I think post-election that will absolutely be a priority. But we are sitting, waiting, ready to drive an election campaign for an independent Scotland that focuses on a move away from the North Sea oil and gas towards renewable energy as a priority, that prioritises public transport infrastructure and active travel investment, that prioritises tackling the energy use in our homes, retrofitting and creating green jobs. 100,000 green jobs is what we're proposing across those sectors, as well as prioritising an independent Scotland within Europe, within the EU. So the independent Scotland that we envisage is a wee bit different than the other parties are proposing, but that's absolutely what engaged me in independence back in 2014 in the Green Party at the time, and has kept me motivated to keep working towards that all the way through. It's a goal absolutely worth aiming for.
Rona?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's what we do. It's what our party's for. We do it 24/7, working on independent strategies. We've got a relatively newly formed task force set up, who, that's what we're doing. And we have to constantly look forward and develop strategies. And of course, cooperate with other independent supporting parties. I mean, it's great that the movement has got bigger. We're going to need that to finally get over the finishing line. So yes, I mean, it's absolute. First and foremost, get out of the pandemic, keep people safe, and then But during that time, the strategists will be working on independence in the background, because it's the core of the reason for our existence.
Great stuff. Quick question for Carolynn. What comes first for the Greens, independence or other issues?
Both. I think, as I mentioned in an answer earlier, independence is how we secure the urgent action that we need to tackle the climate emergency. So absolutely both are a priority. And I think sometimes the Greens are portrayed as a party that don't support independence, or rather don't prioritise independence, but we see it as integral to how we make the changes that we believe are necessary in Scotland to tackle the climate emergency, to address inequality and poverty, to rejoin the EU, which we are absolutely behind. So we prioritise ecology, as in tackling the climate emergency, and independence. They go hand in hand.
Great stuff. Quick question here. A supermajority of 2/3 of MSPs, 86 or more, under Section 3 of the Scotland Act 1998, can dissolve Parliament and call a plebiscite election on independence. This would curtail constantly being told no and years of legal challenges. Is this something that you would support or go for? Start with Delia.
This is one of the reasons that we're promoting a supermajority. It might not be the only route to independence, but it would certainly be something we would be talking about on the first day of the Scottish Parliament as an option. It's in the Scotland Act, and it gives Scotland the opportunity to take the independence into its own hands. I think one of the things we have to look very closely at in the next parliamentary session is what mechanisms do we have in Scotland that we can use to progress everything, and in this instance, Scotland, Scottish independence. And 86 independent supporting MSPs would do that. So hence the argument for Alba to have this supermajority. So it would certainly be one of the avenues, but the number is key, and that's what we have to think about. So I go back to my point earlier. If those 136,000 votes that didn't produce independent supporting MSPs in the west of Scotland last year were translated into less unionist MSPs and up to the million across Scotland, we really should be looking at that. We really need to look at that very, very closely. And that's why we would encourage people to maximise the opportunity of the Scotland Act.
Rona?
Yeah, I mean, I think the word plebiscite was used. I don't believe in that at all. I think we have to absolutely go down the legal routes to get this. You know, for so many reasons, we cannot afford to do this, and for it not to be successful, we do not want to end up like Catalonia, and we have to, you know, we have to be sure that when we do this, that we can't fail. And so I wouldn't support that. I mean, if you know, a majority in the Holyrood shows that the Scottish public want independence, that they've put their faith in us and they've said, yep, you know, go for it. And it's absolutely our duty to do that absolutely as soon as we can. But it has to be done down the legal route. It has to be gold standard, because otherwise you'll not get unionists engaging and we will end up like Catalonia.
Carolynn?
I have some concerns about how it might be perceived by the public if we are felt to be gaming the system to achieve a supermajority, if you like. I don't know how that goes down, but I just wonder if there is a perception that pro-independence MSPs vastly outstrip popular support for independence, then it might be perceived that we've found a way to trick the system, if you like. And I guess I come back to my point that, I guess, as has been mentioned, we don't just want to hold a referendum, we want to win it. We need to have majority support for independence within Scotland to secure independence and to hopefully have, well, the winner and loser's consent that's necessary for Scotland to go forward as an independent nation out the other side. We want the Scottish Parliament to look like and represent the voting public. We don't want it to be a kind of contrived aberration of that to achieve some end. We want it to reflect people's votes accurately. And so I agree that the tried and tested method of securing an independence referendum that will be internationally recognised, and the votes that are cast for the Scottish government, or rather for the Scottish elections, excuse me, reflect the parties that we want to see, not some supermajority outcome, which I don't believe is achievable, and I don't know, I worry about the possibility of it backfiring as a motive.
Thank you. And I'm sorry I haven't got to all of the questions, but just a quickie, somebody's asked. If you were going to the bookies, what date would you put on Scotland achieving independence? Carolynn, I know you look like a person that frequents bookmakers.
Aye, sure, yeah, no, that has to be. I've got my calendar open. 2023 sometime. Yeah, I'm hoping. Let's imagine this winter goes well, COVID doesn't surge again. Next year we can campaign and we have a referendum in 2023.
I'll be putting money on this, by the way. Delia? Well,
I hope you don't think this is a face that frequents the bookies, Charlie. But I would be looking as soon as possible with the caveats around people being comfortable to engage. So 2022-23 would seem reasonable to me.
Well, you're right. You're riding two horses there.
Well, each way bet. It's an each way bet.
Rona?
Yeah, I'll definitely go for 2023. I think that's you know, the sort of safe answer. Obviously, like it to be sooner if possible, but yeah, 2023 I think would be the the safest bet, I think, Charlie, and it's the year before the next general election too. So we need to get it in before the 2024. So I think 2023 would be good.
Good forum. That's good. Well, just as I say, I'm sorry I haven't got through all the questions. They're coming up. In fact, more of them are coming up now that we're finishing, of course. But I would like you just to give us a quick summary of what your party's going to stand for, and what we can do as yes supporting viewers, if you like, to help. And I'll go for Rona.
Okay, thanks, Charlie. Okay, so, what our party are going to do first and foremost is try and get the country back on its feet after COVID. There's just so much to do there, and so much to be worked out there, and that's that is going to take priority. And running in tandem with that in the background is obviously eyes towards the earliest possible referendum. So I mean, I won't bore everybody going through all the manifesto at the moment, but I mean, you know that the massive amounts of investment going into the health service, for example, is absolutely crucial. Investment in jobs, investment in green jobs, and investment in just transition to zero emissions. So there's so much. I think that our manifesto probably was the most exciting manifesto for as long as I can remember, with so many good policies in it that actually promote equality, which is very important, inclusiveness, and trying to close the poverty gap and the attainment gap. And I think the measures that we've included in our manifesto go up, that they're very tangible, practical ways of doing that. So I'm really pleased. I'm really looking forward to the programme for government coming, whether I'm re-elected or not. It will be really interesting to see what bills we're going to be putting through in the next 5 years. And I'm absolutely certain that this will be the session that we see our independence. And I don't want to be sitting here in another 5 years having this same conversation. I hope we've moved on way before that. So as far as activists, I think just stay strong, stay positive with everybody, try not to get too get into sort of rancorous bitterness, because I don't think that really helps anybody. As I said at the start, we do all want the same thing. We maybe just have different ideas of how we get it, but it doesn't mean that we should be rude to each other. So if we can be civilized and among us and all the activists, if we can just work together and try and get our aim, I think that would be probably the best that we can do, and just keep doing it. We've got a fantastic activist base in the independence movement. I mean, passionate people, and unlike the Tories, not self-serving and greedy, and looking after how the rich can get richer. We don't have that, and we're very, very lucky. I think we all feel a bit of a family, to be honest, because we all really believe in independence. So that's it. Just stay positive for the future, because I think it's just around the corner.
Thank you very much, Rona. Just to let you know, I'm going to the bookies to put money in you because you're the favourite. Carolynn.
Make me sound like an old horse there.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for inviting me, and for some really great, challenging questions. It's been a really enjoyable meeting. So the Scottish Greens are a party that have been in the Scottish Parliament since its inception. We're an established party, and with a small number of MSPs, we've managed to achieve so much. We've shown what our priorities are and trying to work constructively with the Scottish Government when we can to achieve things like all the stuff that I've told you about already: free bus travel for those under the age of 22, free school meals across all primary ages, pandemic relief payments, increased public sector pay, and so much more. And we're polling to double our vote share in the next election, which I was kind of horrified when Rona said earlier it's next Thursday. I'm thinking, May the 6th, that's ages away. Next Thursday. So we're on track to double our number of MSPs, which is incredibly exciting as a Green. We want to work towards an independent Scotland in Europe that is prioritising the climate emergency, that is prioritising that vision that we had in 2014 of a hopeful, inclusive yes movement that is going to take forward to an independent Scotland that is welcoming for all Scots. And that's something that I'm really excited by. In terms of what activists can do within the yes movement, I agree with what Rona was saying, staying positive, staying respectful if you can, trying not to be enticed into negative social media stuff, of which there is a lot, and there's bound to be more when an independence campaign starts again, and most importantly, vote Green.
Thank you. Delia?
I think, thank you for inviting me along here tonight, Charlie. We really appreciate the opportunity to have the discussion and get the questions that from people to hopefully give them positive answers. I agree with the other candidates. It's about staying positive, but what the Alba party will bring is a longer term look in independence. Independence is core of what we want to get to, but using that as a foundation for longer term policies, not one-off opportunities that would be not maybe have longevity. But back to the point I made at the beginning, addressing poverty, addressing the ill health, changing that health, the life expectancy that horrifies me, that's core of what we want to do. And to do that, we need to get into Parliament. We're on course to do that with that we have. Vote for the party that's going to give you that chance to get to independence. And like the other candidates have said, stay positive, talk to your candidates and your elected officials and work with them to achieve independence, because it's the way we will get to that independent Scotland that will give us get people out of poverty and a better quality of health. And on May the 6th, vote SNP in your constituency, Alba on the list, to deliver a supermajority in the Parliament, because I disagree with the other candidates here. That's going to make the difference, and it's not gaming the system. So back to your point, Charlie, maybe that's where you're going to the bookies.
Sorry, we lost your camera there, Delia. Your bandwidth was apparently playing up.
All right, okay, sorry, I didn't know that.
We still got your voice, we still got the
right, okay, thank you.
Before we all wrap up, I have to remind you, for those watching, that we have a pension seminar on May the 7th at 7 p.m, where you can ask experts questions on pensions if you want. They've been quite entertaining in the past, these seminars, and I've learned something anyway. I'd like to thank all of you for taking part tonight, and I'd like to wish you all the very best in the coming election. And for those watching, I think we just get out and help whoever we can, wherever we can. Have the discussions, have the conversations with friends who are doubting. I have worries about polls that show a party going to win by a landslide. I think that's one super way for people not to turn out and vote. So I think it's going to be important to get people to vote. And it's obviously important to you to get people to vote for your parties. As I say, thanks again for taking part. I hope to meet you in person one day when all of this is over. And maybe I'll come to the Scottish Parliament and meet you all. Take care of yourselves, and thanks again. There'll be questions that we haven't managed to get to. We'll stick them on Facebook later. Right. Thanks and good night.
Thanks, Charlie.
Thanks very much.
Right, folks, that's you off live stream, so thank you for participating. Good to hear from you all.
Thanks for organising. All the best, folks. Nice to meet you virtually.
Thanks a lot. Charlie, hold on a second, will you?
Yeah.
So I've just corrected the date. It's the 27th. I've stuck it up on Facebook, but just
quickly, I'll put all these questions together and send them across to the candidates that we didn't get to, and see if we get any answers. So you might see them posted up on Facebook in the next few days if they get any answers to us. I'll give them the Yes East Dunbartonshire email address to reply to, but I'll need you to send it to the Greens.
Okay.
So I'll copy and paste all the questions, and then you can work out which ones need to go to the Greens to answer. And if anybody gets back to us, brilliant. If not, then we've asked.
Yeah. Okay, great. I tried to get through as many questions and miss out the duplicated ones where I didn't want them.
Yeah, we got a lot, Charlie, to be honest. We got a lot of questions. So I'm not surprised you didn't get through all of them, to be honest. We had over 50 questions come in, so that's
we have many viewers.
Sorry, I can't tell that until I go back and look at the video, because it doesn't tell me on this, it only tells me on Facebook, and I'm sitting on Zoom. So if I have this running while Facebook Live's running, I hear a double echo because there's a 2-second delay. So I can't listen to it except on Zoom. Anyway.
Okay, thanks Deborah for putting it together.
It's okay. I'll see you later on. Have a good one.
Yeah, same to you. I'm going to get my tea now. It's just sitting there at the other side of my screen.
There were many complimentary comments about the beer, Charlie.
I'm going to. It's going to come up. Of course. Send me my fan letters later.
I will do. Right. Okay. I'll see you later. Thanks. Bye.